So many of you know, excuse me, pardon me. Many of you know that when I was growing up in a small town in Oklahoma, on occasion I would accompany my father to attend the Rotary Club, of which he was a member. And usually my dad would invite me, pardon me, usually my dad would invite me to join him at these meetings, when he thought that the program or the speaker might be of particular interest to me. And this opportunity to attend Rotary Club meetings with my dad, even after I graduated from college and moved to Washington, D.C. Even when I would come home for a visit just for a week or two, my dad would sometimes invite me to come along to Rotary. And on one of these occasions, the guest speaker at Rotary was one of my college classmates. You see, when I was in college, I had the privilege of singing with a choir. And during my junior year in college, this was decades ago, that choir went on a concert tour of the Orient. And one of the places we visited was Hong Kong. Now, on this day, years later, when my dad invited me to attend Rotary yet again, the guest speaker was one of my college classmates who'd been on that trip, that concert tour to the Orient, including Hong Kong. And in fact, he now was a recipient of a Rotary scholarship that allowed him to study in Hong Kong. And so he was reporting back on this experience, having been overseas and in that same setting where we had traveled before. And what made it remarkable, of course, was that this young man's field of study was international economics and business. And because of Rotary, he was able to carry out some of those studies in Hong Kong. Now, given that convergence, international economics and Asia, just think how relevant this young man's Rotary scholarship experience would be in our current world. In fact, I'm struck that there is a through line from these kinds of international scholarships and fellowships that Rotary offers. The Polio Plus program has done so much to eradicate that disease worldwide. And even the cover of the Rotary magazine in February of 2025 that, of course, gives
of arts in education and English, and has a blog, jodigirouard.com, and she writes It's monthly. Her presentation is about NAMI Vermont, our mission and services we provide, and mental health needs, and inspiring personal shared mental health stories, and NAMI walks a Vermont overview. Jodi Girouard.
Thank you. Now I'm nervous after that long introduction. So my name is Jodi Girouard, and I am a lifelong resident of Vermont. I grew up in Shelburne. I now live in South Burlington. And I work part-time for NAMI. Has anyone heard of NAMI before? So most of you have, yeah. Well, it's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we just celebrated 40 years being in Vermont. So that was really exciting. NAMI's mission is to provide support, education, and advocacy for families and individuals that are living with mental health conditions. We do that through programs such as this, which I'm going to share in a little bit, called In Our Own Voice. I help train people, and I gotta take a deep breath. I help train people so that they can learn to share their story and go out into the community and raise awareness, empower other people, and reduce the stigma that is so prevalent when talking about mental health conditions. NAMI strives to make lives better for so many in Vermont. We do this, NAMI is a nonprofit organization, and we rely on grants and donations to keep the programs running. And a lot of our volunteers who present, we pay them a stipend so that they are also empowered to continue the story. And yeah. So NAMI has NAMI Walks, which is coming up in May 17th, and I have some flyers over there with the resources. And NAMI Walks is one of our biggest fundraisers that we do, and it's at the top of Church Street. And we have a walk. We go down with, I think it's called some Boudica, the drummers from Vermont. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they march with us. And we march down Church Street holding signs, and we just awareness, and they have that drumming beat, and it's just such a wonderful experience to be joyful and say, you know, we're here, we're okay, you know. E. Cummings said, to be nobody but yourself, in a way which is doing its best in day, to make you everyone else, means the hardest battle that being has fought, and never. That's what I'm trying to do. A writer, and a continuous survivor of severe mental health conditions. I live in the room. I have tried therapy, and nothing gets rid of them. Voices, the neighbors, because that's been the best healing of hearing things is terrifying. And to continue to be nobody but myself, to be nobody but Jodi. And so that's one way for me to talk about them. When I got done college, I went to Trinity College, And when I got to college, I worked as a home educator in the islands. And there was a lot of abuse with the children that I worked with, a lot of neglect. And it triggered the onset of the voices for me. I've had a lot of trauma in my past, and I hid for a long time. I hid and didn't want to share with anyone. And finally, I couldn't cope, and I opened up to my husband, and I said, "This is what's happening. I'm hearing things, and I'm afraid that you're gonna not want to stay with me." And he said, "Let's get you some help." So I have been hospitalized because of this condition and my bipolar over 40 times. And my husband and I just celebrated 36 years of marriage. It was funny, when I was 17, I had my first hospitalization, and it was my first suicide attempt. And back then in the hospital, they didn't lock the doors. And so he would leave and I would slip out into the hall, and he would be down by the old parking garage where I used to be on the other side, and he would be waving to me and blowing me kisses, and I would do the same thing. So then I was hospitalized during COVID, and we weren't allowed to have visitors, and it was really hard. But they had a patio up on the floor, and my husband said, "Go out on the patio." So I went out on the patio, and he said, "Look down." And he was down there waving and blowing me kisses, just like you were. And that was just such a beautiful moment, just to know that he supported me. And that's what we're trying, right? We're trying to have people support one another. That's what Rotary does, right? Rotary is all about connections and helping one another. And that's what I'm trying to do with my story. I am speaking at the Howard Center conference coming up, and I speak for NAMI. I share my stories, and I have a story to share with you. So this is my newest book, and these are available at Phoenix Books, and I sell them. The Long Haul, and Walter told you a little bit. There wasn't a lot of treatment here. This was just a few years ago. But along the hallway were these photographs by John David Geary, who is a Vermont photographer. I don't know if anyone knows him. And they were all Vermont landscapes. And there was little treatment. Groups were always canceled. I saw a psychiatrist maybe every other day for 5 minutes. So there wasn't a lot of help. Wasn't very clean. But those photographs were up and down the hall. And I chose to jump into them and meet my husband, meet my younger self, be in a beautiful place when I was not in a beautiful place, and find some compassion and healing while I was trying to be gentle with myself. I started writing it while I was there, and there was a little bit of a barrier. There was a little bit of stigma, even at the hospital. They were behind the wall, the barrier, the nurse's station. And they said, "Jodi, we're gonna give you 3 pieces of paper a day." And I said, "That's not enough. I need more to write." And I said, "That's your allotment." I said, "Okay." So I took my first 3 pieces of paper and I wrote 3 poems for 3 patients to see that I saw something beyond their despair, their hurt, something beautiful about them. And then they went up to the desk and said, "Jodi can have our allotment of paper." So I was able to write on scraps and the paper they gave me and write this book. As a thank you, because one of the things that I like to do is do poetry movement, is give poems to people. We just had our house renovated near the airport. The airport's doing renovations there for some of the houses. And I wrote a poem for one of the construction workers. And they cried. But it's just my way of giving back, right? To see beyond, and that's what I want people to do. I want them to see beyond the struggles that I go and say, I can still be a writer and a mother and a wife and a friend and a poet. And anyway, when I was at the Long Hall, as a thank you, there was a courtyard. And there was manicured lawns and there were beautiful flowers that patients were picking for me that we weren't supposed to pick. So I ended up with a collection of styrofoam cups filled with flowers. And there was a woman in her 80s who had never left her room the whole time I was there. She was wearing the paper clothes, like the paper gown you get, the bib you get at the dentist. And she had nothing in her room. And I walked by with all of these flowers, right? And I knocked at her door, and she had never gotten out of bed. And I said, would you like a flower? And this woman sat up in bed, and she said, no one has ever given me a flower before. And I said, take them all. And she said, no. She said, I just want the yellows. She got out of bed for a flower. And she came to the door and I gave her all the flowers, the yellow flowers, and she put them in her empty room that now had something that was hers. And she had a beautiful smile. And that's what I'm trying to give for other people, to say, we have these struggles. I hear voices every day, but that does not always determine who I am, what I am. There are ebbs and flows with my bipolar. There are times when I am so down. There are times when I'm so happy my husband takes my credit card away. And then there's the days that, yeah, and NAMI is one of the places that helps me. I started working at NAMI as a speaker. I started speaking, learning how to speak, and now I'm actually training other people how to be comfortable up and share themselves. And I'm a little nervous today, which is odd, but oh well. Yeah, so we want to reduce the stigma. We want to raise awareness. We want to bring hope to the community. Emily Dickinson said, hope is the thing with feathers that perches on the soul, that sings the tune without words and never stops at all. I want to bring that hope to everyone here in Vermont and all around the world. And I'm trying to do that through my speaking and through my books. I'm going to leave you with a poem. And then I'd love to answer any questions. This one I wrote is called Running Through Fields. We are all children running through the fields of life, some on worn paths, some in tall grass, still others rolling in wildflowers. But we're all here together through the fields of life. And some, the ones who see beyond the fields, they catch themselves in laughter and make chains of dandelions to wear upon their heads, casting off shoes to run barefoot in the wide variety of possibilities. There are so many possibilities that we can do. And I know Rotary is a big place filled with possibilities, and NAMI is trying to do that too. So I'd like to open it up to any questions. I have lots of stories, but we don't have a lot of time. I'm trying to shorten the speech, but yeah, is there any?
I have two young kids in school, and it's amazing when they do like class presentations, how much friendlier kids are to the kids who like struggle speaking or struggle. Have you noticed the stigma decreasing, especially in young people?
Yeah, NAMI has a program called Ending the Silence, and we go in 6th through 12th grade, and we're opening conversations with the younger students and saying, we can talk about this just like we talk about physical health. And I think that it's making a difference. I think kids are more willing to say, I mean, when I was younger, we didn't talk about mental health. And now kids are starting to get it in school and maybe bringing it home and, you know, saying, yeah, maybe I need help. My youngest is 17, and I have him seeing a therapist. And at first he was like, he's been seeing her for several years. But at first he was like, why do I need to see a therapist? I said, because mom has a severe mental health condition, and I want you to have someone that's not attached to our family, that you can just yell, scream, whatever you need to do. He goes, oh, well, I would like to talk to this person. And he said, when he was like seventh grade when he started, he's like, could I even say a swear word? I was like, I can't, but you can. But it was just, and he's been seeing her. They have a thing now in high school. He goes to Rice, and they have a thing called telehealth, where they have a class, a little room where kids can go and do their appointments on the computer. So, on a free period or whatever. So I think it's making a difference. I think we've come a long way.
That's kind of where I'm going with my question. Have you noticed over the years of your experience that there's generally better understanding and acceptance of mental health?
Yeah, I think it's, I think there's a lot more acceptance, but I think there is, still that stigma that, for example, I was, at a writing conference a couple of years ago, and just the person got up and the speakers were attached to something in the other room, so voices were coming through the speakers. And she said, I must be crazy at hearing things. And that's what I'm trying to dispel. I can still be confident and successful, even though I'm hearing things. And there are some moments that might look crazy, but it's when I go and get help. And so I'm trying to dispel that, you know, but I think we've come a long way. I think people are taking those steps, and I'm trying to take those steps and build a bridge and say, I am being really open. And when I go into schools, I say, I hear voices. And some kids will say, after they'll come up to my table of resources and they'll say, she's talking about voices. Maybe I can talk about my anxiety, you know? So I'm putting that big step forward, and they can take that little step if they need to, if they want to. Yeah.
When I was a teenager, my mother had a nervous breakdown, and this was many, many years ago, so things are very different now. And so she ended up in a mental institution for a while. The thing she told me was the hardest thing she ever did in her life was proving that she was sane enough to be able to get out of there. And so I'm wondering, when you're doing all of this work, where the families come in, because it's very hard for a family to admit that something like that is going on. And like my father was not supportive. So it was really confrontational. Even when she came back home, we didn't know what she would know, what was erased. And so I'm just wondering whether NAMI does any kind of counseling with the family and including the kids, because the kids really need to be able to talk to somebody and say, you know, I'm dealing with this. I don't want to tell everybody, all my friends and everything like that. So I'm just wondering what that program does.
We have a program, Family to Family, that is like a support group where you learn about different symptoms, and people are able to share their stories. So we have a lot of those. We don't do a lot of younger kids, and that's kind of hard. We have like resources, you know, like little coloring books and things that get people talking in families about, they have one called the Little Monster. And maybe that's something in schools and things that people, I've written a book called Picture Book that I applied for a grant. I'm gonna find out this summer if I get it. It's called Small Courage. And it's about a mother and her 6-year-old through the seasons of play. And then mom gets sick and has to go away. And it's the little boy's small courage to keep playing, keep doing the things to keep himself well while mom's away, till mom can come back. And that was me and my oldest son. And when I read it to him a long time ago, he started crying and he said, that's us, Mama. And I want other kids to say, maybe that's me, you know, maybe my mom is away or my dad is away, but I can still be myself. So that's what I'm trying to, do for the upcoming year. So I think we have a long way to go, but I think, I've had ECT, electric convulsive therapy as well, several times. And the first time I had it, I lost a lot of memory. They did both sides and now they only do one side at a time. Yeah.
So I'm just curious about treatments and have we progressed over the decades of treatment for these different mental illnesses? And what has your experience? What's your feeling? Do you feel like we've gotten better with treatment or not?
Not with medication. I think, I mean, I take a lot of medication and I have since I was, and a lot of the medication isn't very sedating anymore. So I think that's come a long way. I did take a medication when I was in my 20s for the voices and it hurt my pancreas. So I ended up having, type 1 diabetes. I have to take insulin because my pancreas doesn't work now. So there's a lot of side effects still. So, and there still is today. I took a medication. I went to Baltimore, Maryland, to a PTSD clinic for a month. And I took a medicine that sort of helped the voices. They were a lot less, but it gave me something called pericarditis, which is water around the heart. And I ended up in ICU. And so I'm not really thrilled about medicine, but I think it saved my life so much, so many times that I stick with it. I think therapies have come a long way. They do a lot of different meditation and mindfulness and grounding yourself to the room and deep breathing and, a lot of those things can be very helpful. And there's a lot of skill groups that I've done that have been very helpful. I think one of the biggest things is peer support. There's a place called Williston. Has anyone heard of this? Williston is in Rochester, Vermont, and that's where I wrote this book. It's a peer-run support house run by Vermont, and there's 2 guests there, and it's totally free for any Vermonter. And it's an old farmhouse, and there's a river right through. I don't know if you've been through Rochester, but it's that like narrow valley, and it's just a beautiful place. And peers run it. And they understand what you've been going through because they had their own stories. And you can just stay there for a week or 2 and just take care of yourself. So that's been very helpful too, those places.
Well, my experience is that there's often an association between addiction and mental illness. It puzzles me whether this is a chicken and egg story. Does someone become an addict and get depressed, or get depressed and become an addict? Anybody know that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I think it varies. It can be either way, right? For everyone. I was 13 when I started having anxiety and depression. There was a lot of chaos in my house. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of alcohol use in the family. And so I felt like I couldn't belong. I didn't know what to do. And the anxiety and isolation got worse.
I think NAMI also does advocacy with legislatures, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I used to be a state legislator, and I was on the Health and Welfare Committee, and then several years ago, we tried to, because I think generally our society recognizes that we really have neglected mental health, and we need to invest more in that. And so we actually, tried to make sure that like people who work for the Howard Center for different designated agencies had, could have higher salaries so they could attract more workers. But how do you think the landscape is for our government, our society sort of investing more in mental health, both treatment and sort of prevention, making people well, stay well?
I think we have a long way to go for that. I'm a client of Howard Center and they have so much trouble keeping people on staff. And like, when I wrote The Long Haul, there was not that many staff there. And it's just, I think there's a burnout rate, but I also think that, there's not enough money in it to sustain a lot of people. NAMI does advocacy. We have a day in January where we go and talk to, in Montpelier, and talk to legislatures and try to say we need more money put towards this, towards Howard Center and different places like NAMI. And yeah, I think early prevention is the key.
Thank you for everything you told us this morning. And I can't recall if you said you go to schools to talk to younger children, because we're such a rural state, and in Chittenden County, children may have some different exposure. In small towns, like I grew up in, there may be no place to look for somebody that understands what you're going through. So do you do something special in rural areas?
So NAMI Vermont, does Ending the Silence, which is the one for the schools, 6th through 12th grade. And NAMI is based in Williston, but we have 5 affiliates. So we try to put speeches in all of Vermont. So we work trying to get into those, especially the rural areas.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anyone else?
Got a few minutes. I had an experience years ago, which kind of illustrates how this kind of problem can influence a life. So I'm a physician, retired, probably Lisbon, and I came here from the University of California, San Diego, and when I was a junior faculty member there, all the junior faculty had advisees. And I had this one delightful first-year medical student who was a Phi Beta Kappa Stanford graduate, absolutely brilliant, charming. And one day I get a call, he's having a major mental health problem. And the idea when you were advising, you didn't, you stuck with that student no matter what happened. And sure enough, they had him in a padded room, but they probably needed it, as barbaric as that sounds. He got over this, I think, I'm as far from a psychiatrist as you can get. I think all they had basically was lithium at the time, and they got him through that. And then the question was, does she stay in medical school? I don't think this was his first episode, but I don't recollect the details. So that's sort of the ethical, moral question. Does one, and there were no, according at the time, there was no question about the diagnosis, although maybe today there would be a question. And it's sort of a good question for the ethics of the New York Times. That he could not go on. You could not have someone who could unpredictably become unable to care for patients. Incredibly difficult, but right decision. What's your take on something like that? Could that have changed in some way these days?
I want to say yes, but I don't know. When I got out of college and stopped teaching, doing the home education, I taught 6th grade for a little while, then I got really sick. And I said, I can't be with the children. So I feel for your story, because it hits me too. I didn't think I was capable enough to day in, day out be with children, hearing things. And we need to protect society. We need to make sure that they get the right care. I don't know what the answer is. Yeah, I think,
There is none.
yeah, I think it's a sad situation because I have 80, maybe 70% of my days are good days. But I have those 30% where I curl in the ball things, I'm scared, I'm thinking, I don't want to live, and so we need to protect people from that, but we also need people to talk about it. We need people to say, this is something that I do, but I can still be certain things, I can still be a mother, a wife, a writer, whatever I want, but those 30% really affect me.
Time?
We're at time.
Okay.
Okay, just, are you familiar with Me Too Orchestra?
Mhm.
So an example of, I just lost the word, but an orchestra person, the leader.
Conductor.
Thank you, the conductor, was asked to leave an orchestra because of his mental health condition. And he now is the conductor, thank you, of people who have mental health conditions.
Wow.
Probably 50-50 people with mental health conditions and 50% without. It's amazing. I'm so grateful that he founded this because what they provide is not anywhere else.
And NAMI, I'm gonna close with NAMI, is trying to do that for other people. We're trying to empower people. I work part-time for NAMI now. When I'm having a bad day, I can work the next day unless there's a speech. But like for the office and going around and doing outreach, they kind of accommodate for me. So that's a job that I can do. Thank you very much for having
Thank you,
me.
Jodi.
Walter's gonna take care of that.
So, we'll do this. Mark?
It's all you, Walter.
Okay, so, first of all, thank you for presenting, a donation we made to the Williston Central School Mentoring Program in your name.
Thank you.
And this, we have a raffle every week, and so I want you to just pick out my checks, no, you don't. And read the last.
Right, guess I'm gonna need these. The last three are 625. I put evaluations on the table. If you only have time to do the top, the check parts, that's the most important. If you have a minute to do that for me, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
A little nervous too. I believe I may have already brought up this first part in a previous inspiration, but I've got kind of an extension off of it. So the first part is just, a while back I was to, Goddard Space Flight Center down there. And I saw a meteorite and a sliced open, and it was a ton of colors within the rock of this meteorite. And what you were looking at was a lot of different elements, a lot of amino acids, a lot of bits of DNA, all of the building blocks of life. And this thing's flying around out there in the universe, and it came down to Earth to season our suit. And that's one part. And then the second element of this is, when I was away traveling on the ski part of my trip, there was a photographer there. And he, just a guy who likes to take pictures, not a real photographer, not a professional photographer. But he was pretty talented and he had some cool tech equipment. And he was showing us pictures of galaxies that he had taken time-lapse pictures of these galaxies. And his pictures kind of rivaled things you would see out of like the founding, that that's what's out there. And, thinking beyond where we live. So, I'm not a particularly religious soul. I'm not sure what Mother Nature's plan is for us, but I know there are forces out there beyond what I know, and I just hope she's kind to us.
You didn't seem too nervous.